Alright, so I wanted to make a small video for this week. I know I already made a few small ones, but it is my birthday this week, so I feel like I can have the time to spend for myself, and so I'm going to make this short, and I'm going to make it, like, off the cuff, so don't expect it to be well scripted, don't expect my arguments to be, well thought ones. I'm going to be thinking of them off the bat. So there is some discourse at the moment when it comes to the new Superman from James Gunn in comparison to the old Superman from Zack Snyder. There's literally a division. Hold on, let me get more in middle frame. There's literally a division between the two of Superman fans because one of them prefers Zack Snyder's Superman more and the other one prefers obviously James Gunn's more. Now, if I had to have a preference, I would honestly lean on James Gunn. But before you start yelling at me, I do appreciate the Zack Snyder Superman as well. I feel like they are both good representations of Superman, Kal-El, Clark, well, yeah, Clark Kent as well in general. It's just that they show off the two different sides of the character that are represented throughout the comic book sometimes. Like, the Zack Snyder Superman is the much more serious, brooding Superman, but I wouldn't say that he would be as hope-inducing. He does feel like he's a hope-inducing character, but he gives off more of a godlike power to him, and that makes sense because he has godlike power. In comparison, if you were to get the power level of the Zack Snyder Superman and pin it against the James Gunn Superman, the James Gunn Superman wouldn't stand a chance. But that's not what this argument is generally about, because it's not just about the strength of the Superman. Yes, Zack Snyder Superman was able to take out a spaceship that was literally terraforming a planet whilst weakened, but then James Gunn Superman, he would get erased by that thing if I had to be honest, but he is still a good Superman because James Gunn is building a universe in which the heroes can still be within near the same level as Superman, and so Superman has to be on a lower power level than he usually is represented as. But then Zack Snyder's Superman, he's always been this overpowered godly being that only Batman really seems to have pummeled, and oh yeah, and Doomsday in the Batman versus Superman movie. But he was still a good representation. It's just that he was more dark. He didn't really seem as lighthearted as Clark Kent. There probably is still a few moments where he was lighthearted, but Zack Snyder was more of a, like, I don't know how to explain this in a way that feels right. Zack Snyder's Superman feels like it's meant to be artistic. It's just a representation of a Superman character in the most artistic way possible. But Zack Snyder, if I had to explain his throughout kind of like an art explanation, it feels like a really good graffiti artist, right? Yeah, he feels, because it's much more colorful. It brings a lot about much more joy. It's not really considered as much of an art, but like a really good representation of the comic book character. Both of them are good representations. It's just that if I had to personally say which one is a better representation of the mainline comic book Superman, it would be James Gunn's Superman, because he's colorful, he's open. James Gunn's Superman is more level and more on Earth, as he's been represented to be more in connection with humanity, and protects even the smallest lives. Although there is that one scene where a gigantic axolotl creature, I forget what its actual proper name is in universe, it starts wiping out a good portion of the city. People say that there is still some casualties that happen there, but James Gunn says that there is none, because in the movie there is a scene in the news that says no casualties happened, but then a whole people who disagree with it saying like, oh, but you see people get wiped out by this tail. Doesn't necessarily mean that they died, but they were probably still injured from the whole incident. And he saved a squirrel instead of saving people, is what people argued as well. It's a weird argument for me personally. And then they look over at Zack Snyder's Superman and say, oh, there was this whole tanker that rolled over and blew up a building behind him. Now, I would have to hope, I would need to rewatch Zack Snyder's Superman, but considering this is an off-the-cuff video, I haven't rewatched it for it. I have to consider that that was probably an evacuated part of the city, hopefully. And to be fair, a lot of people have pointed out this is his first alien fight. He's fought a lot of just normal criminals and probably some slight super criminals in the universe, but he hadn't faced up against other Kryptonians or beasts like what he faced up in the movie. So casualties happening would have felt like it would have happened no matter what. But then James Gunn Superman is more of a Superman who has grown into what he is. But then you look over at Zack Snyder's and he's still in his younger form. He doesn't quite know how to keep attention to the casualties that are going to happen around him. So that's not a downside for him. That makes sense for Zack Snyder's Superman to be making those mistakes, and it makes sense for James Gunn's Superman to be like looking for these like small lives to save because he already knows how to save all the normal human ones. And that's why he was so adamant on trying to save the giant axolotl as well, because he wouldn't want the giant axolotl to fall in that combat. Costume design, I would say that the James Gunn costume is definitely way more accurate. I was a bit iffy on the trunks before I actually watched the movie, like the Superman underwear he was wearing. A lot of people explained that it's probably better to see this godlike being who's capable of ripping cars and holding up buildings and all that in a pair of underwear, because it would be funny to look at. But then if you were to watch Zack Snyder's Superman, he's terrifying. I admit that if I was saved by him, I'd be like, yeah, cool, thank you. But if I just wasn't aware that that guy was a superhero and I just watched him throw a truck across the road, I would be scared. I would. He doesn't look friendly in his suit, is what I'm saying. It's only when he's in like a bright light and more saturation. I nearly said that poorly. More saturation is shown in his suit that he feels more friendly. But most of the time, it's darker tones, as that's how Zack Snyder's movies usually come out as. My voice is cracking. And so when you compare the two of them, they're both great Supermen. It's just different points in their times and different ways that they're represented. One's a more grittier, early Superman who's dealing with having to like fight things that he's never fought before, and so there will be casualties. And then there's the James Gunn Superman who is of more age. He's aware of all the stuff he should and shouldn't be doing when saving lives, and he still learns. He's still learning, but for some reason he's also weaker. That's more of an in-universe thing. He's just weaker with his powers and everything than in Zack Snyder's Superman. But again, that's not something that means that he immediately wins or anything. Just because he's stronger, if they actually fought each other, yes, it would mean that he would win. But as a best Superman thing, I feel like they're kind of like they're 50-50, realistically. If I had to pick between the two of them, I would pick James Gunn, but I think that's might just be because he was the more recent one that I watched. It could also be that I just didn't like the way that they were handling the DCU near the end of its lifespan, especially with the Flash movie. I did not like the Flash movie. It looked horrendous. Why was there a rotoscope as a representation of time? It looked neat, but it didn't feel right. I'm rambling on about a topic that was not the topic of this point. What I'm saying is that for both the Supermen, I believe both of them are good and great Supermen. And the actors themselves love being Superman. Henry Cavill, he's a massive nerd, like anyone else, like us. And that's why he liked the role and he liked playing it, because he felt like that's what a Superman role would be representative as. And that's good, because he won't play roles unless he feels like it's the right like way to present the character. And then for David, I can't say his actual last name. I keep going to pronounce it as like corn sweat, and I don't mean that. I'm just gonna call him David, right? David Superman. David is also a nerd. He wants to be in the next Batman movie alongside Batman. I don't think it'll happen, as that would be a bit of a jarring change to have this dark, gritty Batman, which is good, matched up with this hopeful, lighthearted Superman just yet. I feel like they need to get Batman into a point where it makes sense for Superman to interact with him. And David did explain that if he felt like if Superman was aware that Batman existed in the universe and he heard of a man dressed up as a bat, like saving people in Gotham, he would go check it out. That's another thing to explain is the villains and the general vibes of the movies between the Man of Steel movie as well as like the Justice League and all that, everything else that Henry Cavill's Superman was in, compared to the compared to the James Gunn movie, because the James Gunn movie is much more lighthearted, much more colorful. It's got a bit more comedy to it, and it makes you feel more hopeful after watching it. The Zack Snyder movie, it does have a bit of hope in it. It's not really that colorful, which isn't a problem. That's just how the movie was represented. And when you watch it, it's more to get your adrenaline going and to go like, yes, he won this fight. And then you watch the Batman versus Superman movie and you go, oh my God, he won this fight at a massive sacrifice to a lot of the people around him. and that's because he wasn't aware of what was going on. But then you watch James Gunn's Superman, he's like, he's helping everyone that he possibly can with what he can do. And there's nothing's going to stop him. No borders are going to stop him. No governments are going to stop him. If someone's going to hurt someone else, he's going to stop that from happening, just generally, outright. So that's why I like that Superman more as well, because I'm pretty sure there was a scene where the Zack Snyder Superman interacted with the government, and he kind of just aura farmed throughout the entirety of the thing, because he was like, yep, put me in handcuffs, whatever. And then when they finally said like, oh yeah, we can let you go, or something along the lines of that, he just kind of like gently uncuffs them by just moving his hands apart. But yeah, it's he feels much more rugged and intended to be an action dramatic Superman, which is good because that feels like what would realistically happen. But then James Gunn's Superman feels a lot more lighthearted, more comic book accurate. He feels like what the most of the Superman covers look like. You see, there's just two sides to Superman, and both of them represent both of them very well. And then there's a whole separate argument, right, which is entirely separate from the Supermen themselves, is the whole political ideology, like the whole political issue. You see, the Superman in the Zack Snyder movie, he didn't really deal with much in the way of political stuff. At most, he probably did try and mess around with the government when they tried to do stuff, but it wasn't for like any specific reasoning. He just didn't like watching people get hurt. But then the new Superman movie, especially with when it's released, it goes into stuff that a lot of people would consider controversial, depending on which side of political whatever the hell you're on. I'm not much of a political person, but it is an important part of this conversation. So yeah, a lot of people are like, oh, it's all woke, you know, it's talking about how this refugees and stuff should be allowed to be where they are and all that, and they shouldn't be judged for what they are, and just general stuff like that, you know. And that's why people wouldn't like that movie if they went against that kind of like political standpoint, right? So that was one of the arguments against the movie as well, and it had nothing to do with the actual Superman himself. They just didn't like the way that the story worked and what it represented. Zack Snyder Superman, it's good. It doesn't do any of those like major moral real life issues. It's just more of a I've grown up having issues because of my powers, and now I can use them to do good. And oh god, here comes a giant alien man who wants to reform the entirety of the planet. That was another thing I would have to say is I do say that I don't like the idea of Clark letting his father get swept up by a tornado to keep his identity. Like, I feel like he realistically would have stopped that from happening if he was capable of it. If they wanted to do something like that, they could have given his father some kind of illness, like what they did in the Smallville series where his father died from an illness. At least I'm pretty sure from memory that's what happened. And Superman or Clark Kent couldn't do anything about it because he didn't have any capability of saving him, because that's just a human sickness. He can't stop that. And that would be the same issue as that James Gunn Superman couldn't stop that either unless he had some connections. And yeah, that would have been a better representation other than just some dude getting sucked into a tornado and just going, don't do it. Let me get killed. That's my only criticism, a major criticism of the Man of Steel movie. That was really ridiculous. I know it was meant to like show off something, it was meant to represent something, but there was such a it felt weird. It felt stupid. But nonetheless, both of them are great Supermen. Again, I lean on the James Gunn side. I am going to buy the hard disc copy of James Gunn Superman, but that's because I'm also trying to lean back into like hard media as well, because I rewatched I think it was Adventure Time. I rewatched Adventure Time recently on streaming platforms, and like half the stuff in it was cut out. I don't know what half the stuff even was, but I just know stuff is missing because just suddenly abrupt cuts between it. Just online censorship is a pain in the butt. So I suggest buying hard copies of everything you watch nowadays, as then you own it to an extent. Obviously not to like copy it and then send it out to your friends or anything like that. It's only if it's not being produced again that you would want to do that. But if you can buy it as a hard copy, buy it as a hard copy, please. It'll stop it from being censored, and it would probably save you more money in the long run if you wanted to rewatch it. You don't have to subscribe to a random streaming service for a month and then forget about it, and then for it to catch right back up again. I'm making a lot of lines that could go directly into advertisements, but I'm not sponsored yet. And speaking of not being sponsored, I should probably end off this video for now. If you like this video, even though it was a ramble, feel free to subscribe. And while you're down there, you might as well like this video, as it would push it into the algorithm for others to see. Now, I know that will be a lot of people in the comments section going against me, going like, Zack Snyder's the better one. I don't mind. Like, Zack Snyder is a good Superman. I won't say that he's the better Superman, but he's not a bad Superman. I'm not saying he's a bad Superman. What is wrong with you? Oh, and also, not sponsored. Thank you to my members, Tina Buttercup, Crystal Kensbit, Jasmine Wilson, Wilberflight, and Nugsy1. I'll see you all next week.